Good morning. My name is Rachel VanJohnson. I'm from the U.S. Embassy here in Stockholm, Sweden, where I work in the Consular section. I'm so excited to see so many musicians here today that are interested in performing in the United States. I was asked this morning to answer a few questions, so I'm going to go through those and then I'll take more of your questions at the end. Some of the questions that I have to answer today are what does the U.S. Embassy do and what don't we do, so I'll go through that. What is the Visa Waiver Program and the electronic system for travel authorization? What is a B1, B2 visitor visa? How do you apply for a visa? What can a musician do under a B1, B2 visa or in Visa Waiver Program status? How to obtain an employment authorization, and then any other questions you might have. So I know the visa process may be confusing or a little intimidating for some people, and our goal at the U.S. Embassy is to help you navigate the process and be successful. So I'm going to try and help you with that today. And then I'll give you some resources at the end. Everything I'm going to tell you today is available on our website, which is travel.state.gov. So nothing here is new or secret. We have all this information available. So if you need some additional resources specific to your situation, I can help you find those after we finish today. So I'm going to start with what the U.S. Embassy does. The U.S. government is really big, and so there are different agencies that do different things in the visa process. So at the U.S. Embassy, we have two main functions. First, we help American citizens. We help them with passports, if they have children abroad, if there are any deaths abroad, and if they have any emergencies. And then second, we help you guys. We help people living in Sweden who need a visa, whether it's a visa to live permanently in the U.S. or a visa to visit the U.S. temporarily or to work in the U.S. or to perform in the U.S. like I think you guys are interested in. What we don't do at the embassy, we can't do work, we do not issue work permits, that's Department of Homeland Security. We do work visas, and we can't guarantee admission into the US. So I'll go over a little bit more about what a visa is in a little bit. And we do not administer the Visa Waiver Program or the Electronic System for Travel Authorization, which you guys call ESTA. Customs and Border Protection does that, which is a different US government agency and is not what we do at the embassy. So what is the Visa Waiver Program and what is the Electronic System for Travel Authorization, or ESTA? So the Visa Waiver Program is a program that Sweden is a part of, as well as quite a few other countries, and it enables Swedes and other countries who are eligible to travel to the United States for tourism or for business for 90 days. And they don't have to obtain a visa if you're part of this program. In order to be able to travel to the U.S. on the Visa Waiver Program, you need an ESTA. So ESTA is an automated system that assists in determining who is eligible to travel to the U.S. under a Visa Waiver Program. Does anybody in here, has anybody gone through the ESTA program? You kind of, okay, all right. So it's an online questionnaire, so you guys all know what it is. Okay. As of January 12th, 2009, all Visa Waiver Program travelers had to use ESTA. Before that, it was a different program. So if you're traveling to the US, you have to have ESTA. In most cases, ESTA provides an immediate determination of eligibility for travel under the Visa Waiver Program. Approved ESTA applications are valid for 2 years or until the passport expires, whichever comes first, and for multiple trips to the United States without the traveler having to reapply for another ESTA. So if you wanted to spend your July vacation in the US this year, you could also spend your July vacation in the US next year. It's multiple trips over a 2-year period. When traveling to the U.S. with the approved ESTA, you may only stay for up to 90 days at a time, and there should be a reasonable amount of time between stays. Otherwise, when you enter the U.S., Customs and Border Protection may think that you're trying to live there permanently. So if you were to go for 89 days, come back for one, go for 89 days, come back for one, you're probably going to have to come get a visa at that point. Okay, so what is a visa? A visa is a stamp that, actually really quite a nice stamp that's put in your passport. Has anybody seen a visa? People, yeah? Okay. So there's generally a little bit of confusion about what a visa is. So when you come to the embassy, we print the visa in your passport, and it is your permission to apply for entry into the U.S. When you present your visa when you enter the U.S., the Customs and Border Protection agent who receives you will determine whether or not you actually get to enter the U.S., but the visa gives you permission to travel there, not to enter. And then a B1, B2 visitor visa. So a visitor visa is a type of non-immigrant visa, which means you're not planning to move to the US permanently. That's what a non-immigrant visa is. Immigrant visas are green cards. So it's a B1, B2 is a non-immigrant visa for persons who want to enter the US temporarily for pleasure, business, tourism, or medical treatment. If your ESTA application is denied, you can come to the US and apply for a B1, B2 visa at the US Embassy in Stockholm, and that's where I'll see you and we'll do your interview. And I should note that the B1, B2 visas are valid for 10 years multiple entry, and ESTA is only valid for 2 years. So how do you apply for a visa? So you start online. You have to apply through the website. So you can go to travel.state.gov, and I can give you guys the website later if you have trouble remembering that, but it's travel.state.gov, and then we also have a US Embassy Sweden website that will direct you back to that website as well if you lose it. So you go through the website and apply. You complete and submit the application. You pay the fee online. So the fee for P visas, performer visas, is $190, and the fee for B1, B2 visas is $160. So the fee in Swedish crowns changes with the exchange rate, but we always keep the US price at that level, $190 and $160. After you've filled out the application online, you book an appointment, and then you come in for your visa interview. Once approved, if applicants are approved, they usually receive their passport and visa within 5 business days in the mail. So when you come to the interview, I know it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. When you come to the interview, you need to bring your passport, a passport photo. We use the photo to print on your visa, so your visa shows your face and who you are. A form called the DS-160 that you'll generate when you do the online application, and a payment receipt. Some people may need additional documentation on a case-by-case basis, and that information is available on the website, and if you have questions after, I can talk to you about that. Does anyone have any idea what a consular officer is looking for when you go to a visa interview? Does anybody have any ideas of the questions they might ask? Okay, so it's going to be really basic. So we're going to know who you are, what you want to do. So what kind of instrument do you play? Do you sing? What will you be doing in the U.S.? Where will you be performing? Will you be paid when you're performing? So those are the kinds of questions. And so when you come to your interview, I'm sure that all of you have all those answers as you're filling things out and you're looking to perform in the U.S. So that's what the visa interview, that's what the officer's looking for during the visa interview. So, and I know what you guys really want to know is what can a musician do on different visas. So on the B1, B2 visa, which is the temporary visa for business or for pleasure, or ESTA, there are a couple different things that musicians can do. So I'm going to distinguish between categories of musicians because that matters to us when we're looking at what you can do on a visa category. So first we have amateurs and what amateurs can do on a B1, B2 visa. I don't think many people in this audience are amateurs, but I'm going to go through the definition just in case. So an amateur is someone who is an entertainer who is not a member of a profession associated with the activity. So an amateur normally performs without payment, and a performer who is normally compensated for performing cannot qualify to perform on a B1, B2 visa, even if they don't make a living doing it. So, or even if they don't agree to be paid in the U.S. So if you are a student and your school choir is singing in the U.S., that's fine as an amateur. If you are an accountant and on the weekends you play at a bar for payment, then because you would be normally receiving payment, you can't use a B1, B2. So that's how we distinguish amateur, and all this information is available online with some more examples if you're trying to figure out what is specific to you. So what do we consider a professional? So a professional member of the entertainment profession includes not only performing artists such as stage and movie actors, musicians, singers, and dancers, but also other personnel such as technicians, electricians, makeup specialists, film crew members, coming to the U.S. to produce films, etc. So professionals cannot give public performances in the U.S. They can use a recording facility, but only if the recording will be distributed and sold outside of the United States. So if you are going to record a song and you're only going to distribute it and sell it in Sweden and Norway, then that's appropriate. But if you're going to release it globally, then the B1, B2 is not appropriate. And then also anyone can come to the US if you are participating in a competition, and you will not receive any payment for participating in the competition, except for you are allowed to have expenses reimbursed, so hotel or airfare or things like that. And then prize money is all right, but other than that, you can't be receiving payment from an employer or something like that. So you can participate in a competition, provided that there is no remuneration, is what the word we use, other than prize money or expenses. So just to recap, the really important things, musicians cannot receive payment for performing on a B1, B2 visa, and you cannot perform in front of a paying audience, regardless of whether or not you get paid. And that kind of makes sense, right? So if you're getting paid, it's work. So if you're working, then you need a work visa, not a visitor visa. And the work visa that I think will be most applicable to you guys is a P visa. That's P as in Paul. All of our visas are lettered. And so if you're performing in front of a paying audience, you need a P visa. For some categories of people, an O visa might be appropriate. People who might look for an O visa are what we call people of international renown. So really famous artists who are known throughout the world could qualify for an O visa. P1 and O1 visas authorize a visa applicant to be able to perform with an entertainment group that has been recognized internationally as being outstanding in the discipline for a sustained and substantial period of time. Okay, and then there's another agency in the US that administers the process for petitions or employment authorizations, but I'm just going to give you a brief summary of that because I know it's important to the visa process. So to obtain an employment authorization, the U.S. employer, so the person who's sponsoring you in the U.S., who you will perform with, they must submit an I-129 form with the Department of Homeland Security's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. The process of filling this form out is not controlled by the Department of State of the Embassy. This is all done separately from us. The form can be accessed at uscis.gov. And once the form, if it's approved, once approved, you will receive an employment authorization in the form of an I-797. The I-797 is not a visa, but when you receive it, you'll bring it in to the visa interview, and you'll know exactly what it is. It's a paper, and it's on very, very fancy paper. In the U.S., we print important documents on really fancy paper, like diplomas and marriage certificates and things like that. So you'll know exactly what document it is. It'll be your petition, and you'll bring it into the interview when you have your visa interview. Okay, so the places where you can find all the information you need are travel.state.gov, and then also at our embassy, which will direct you to the right parts of travel.state.gov. And our U.S. Embassy website here in Sweden is se.usembassy.gov. I'd like to open the floor for some questions. If you have specific questions that are more specific to you and you want to talk to me afterwards, I'll hang around so I can answer your questions. But if you guys have questions now that you're comfortable asking in front of the group, I'm happy to help. Please.
If you were in the US on an ESTA, but you were in fact a musician or a hobby musician, and sort of guesting, featuring a band playing, like working, but you weren't, it was like a spontaneous performance. Was that cause any problem for you?
So you're in the US and you're hosting a band?
No, I'm in the US I'm on a vacation.
Uh-huh.
But I run into fellow musicians, and I do a guest performance with a band.
So if you're receiving payment for that, that's a problem, because that's technically work.
Yeah, and if I'm not?
If you're not receiving payment, it shouldn't be a problem, but it depends on more around the circumstance. So have people paid to be admitted to the event? So anytime payments involved and it would be considered work, then that's when you get into the issue.
So I might encounter a visa problem?
Yeah, like if it's a festival or something like that and people have paid to get into the festival, that's where you might come into some problems.
Because I'm just thinking it could be like a common situation.
I think that is kind of a common situation, and it can be a little bit of an issue. And I will say that if you do run into something like that and it can be a little bit of an issue, it's always better to come in for an interview and to work through the visa process. And if you have questions, please do ask them, and ask when you enter the US. You can also talk to the people who do just a quick interview when you come in, and talk to them about what you're planning to do. They're there to help you. And so if it's something that you can't do, they'll tell you that, and then you won't have issues later on down the road when you do something that you think might be correct, but maybe isn't interpreted that way. So, thank you. That was a really good question and a common one that we get.
Also the same thing if you do play for an event where you earn nothing, but maybe it's a charity event?
Yes, so depending on how the people pay to come into the event is the main thing. So the main thing is that you just can't be paid, and people can't have to pay to see you.
Okay, yeah.
So another question related to the ESTA question is, if you go to the States and do, I mean not commercial, but you play for promotional activity, but not taking money, you play in TV shows, make radio interviews, make some free gigs, what type of visa should you then have?
So some of the, you are allowed to promote things in the US, but I think if you're, and a lot of this varies, so there are some gray areas on kind of a case-by-case basis. But if you are, if you're performing on TV or doing things, and then people are paying to see those programs, and I think it could get a little bit, confusing. I would assume that if you're doing that, you're also touring and performing, so you would be in the US on a P visa otherwise. But
maybe we were happy not getting caught, I don't know.
So you say people just aren't getting caught?
No, but we went to Canada and US, and in Canada they have this visa for promoting yourself.
Yes, of course.
But not getting paid.
Yes, and we don't have a promoting visa. It generally falls under the B1, B2 visa, if you're just doing general promoting.
So we had the ESTA, and yeah, we were happy not
Yes, depending on...
getting into trouble. Yeah.
Yes, and that would, basic promoting, yes, and that would just sort of depend on a case-by-case basis. So, you guys are asking tough questions. Can I ask you, wait just 1 second, and they'll bring the... Oh, sorry.
Hi. What about for songwriters who aren't looking to perform?
Songwriters who want to perform in the U.S.?
Who aren't looking to perform, if you're just looking to write songs.
Yeah, so the visa category kind of encompasses the whole members of the entertainment profession. And so a lot of this would apply as well. And so if you are a songwriter and you're writing songs, then you're sort of working in the U.S., if that's your primary method of work. What part of the way to work on this is, it should be a conversation with the person in the U.S. who is putting together your petition and employing you. Because if they're working on your petition in the U.S. and they're sponsoring you to come over for a work visa, they should kind of understand what is work and what isn't work, and be able to help you through that process. If you do have any questions, you're welcome to come in or to call the embassy. So when we know a little bit more about your specific circumstance, we can sort of help you figure out what works and what doesn't.
No, I'm asking because technically when you write songs, you're self-employed. You're never receiving payment in the U.S. You're receiving payment from a PRO in Sweden. Like STIM. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think in that case, in some of these areas, they get, depending on how you're getting paid and where you are and how long you're there, it could vary by the individual. So yes, that you would probably want to come in for a visa interview, and we could talk to you more about your particular situation.
Hi, so I have 2 questions. Sorry.
Of course.
So, what are the kind of prices attached to this? What's the cost for visas, basically?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you're coming in for a B1, B2 visa, it's $160. So that's about 1,600 crowns. And then if you're coming in for a P visa, it's $190. And it varies based on the Swedish exchange rate, but those are our set U.S. prices.
Got it. And my next question was, what about management? So if you're there as a manager managing a foreign artist in the U.S., what kind of visas would you need in that situation?
So in that case, we would probably bucket that all together as what we call members of the entertainment profession, everything even from makeup artists and people who are assisting with that. And so in that case, if you're working in the U.S., a P visa might be appropriate, would sort of fall into that category.
Cool. Got it. Thank you.
Hey, hello. I'm thinking about what is the consequences if you're breaking this? What's type of, is it a question with the tax authorities, or is it strict laws, or because we are talking now like.
No, and
Do you
that's a
I'm not.
no, of course, and it's a
Yeah.
great question, and
Yeah.
it's different because the visa rules are different in Sweden. Then every country has their own visa rules, so it's a great question. So I think it's all governed by, we have a immigration law, Immigration and Nationality Act, and so under the immigration law, that's what all this comes from. And so if you break the immigration law, it can impact your ability to travel to the U.S. in the future. So that's what the consequence is.
Okay, but it's nothing more like, it's more like a mini persona non grata or something, or
So I think the violations can really vary on a spectrum, but there are different issues for people who have broken immigration law. Kind of like any crime you break has a different.
Yeah, I understand, of course, but okay.
There are, if you look on our website, there are sort of specific, for example, if you were to stay for a certain amount of time, there are different consequences for different specific things that you can look at on the website.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
However, we hope, we do encourage people, we want to encourage people to come, musicians, to the U.S. And to do so legally, so we hope that everyone will go through the right process, because this is something that we do want to promote. We really want you guys to play in the U.S. and we appreciate the interest. So.
Yeah. So I have a question over here.
Oh, where? Over here? Oh, sorry. Thank you.
So what's the situation if it's easier to apply on the film industry, but if you're a film crew member, a photographer,
Yes.
working for a Swedish production company, doing a production in the US, but I'm getting paid from a Swedish company, what's the situation over there?
So I would have to talk to you a little bit more, know a little bit more about your specific situation here. But generally, if you're filming in the U.S., you would need a visa. And so the entertainer visa also it includes athletes and film production.
Okay,
So.
even if it's a Swedish company who is my client, and I'm getting paid in Swedish kroner, not in the US dollar.
Yeah, so without knowing. For some of these situations, it's important to know all the specifics and to get into the financials and things with you. And so I can't say specifically for that exact situation, but generally if you're filming in the US, you would need a P visa.
Okay.
Hi. What would be a reason to reject a P visa?
To reject a P visa?
Yeah.
I think generally most of our P visa applicants are really qualified. There are, similar to the ESTA, there's a list of things that for people who don't qualify for certain visa categories, people who may have committed crimes and things like that. But generally our P visa applicants are pretty qualified. Their employers in the US put together the paperwork. They generally have a concert they're going to give or something like that, and it's we generally don't have a lot of problems.
So just a follow-up question. How important is it for the US employee? I mean, how qualified should they be? I mean, do you have any regulations or something like that?
So if you were going to apply for a B1, B2 visa to come to Disney World, how qualified do you think you would need to be?
I mean the employer, like the American employer.
No, I was going to say that, you just have to be someone who actually wants to go to Disney World and be able to fund it. Yeah. I think with the musicians, if you have a gig lined up and you have an approved petition, that's generally sort of what we're looking for. Our colleagues in the Department of Homeland Security already go through and put together the petition. And if you have an approved petition, then that's sort of what we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask you on the cost side? You said $190, that's per musician, right?
That's per visa.
Per person, yes.
Yeah, per person. So if you have a band, each person would have to pay $190.
Then you also need a petition, or you need a petitioner in the States and also to have the contracts in order before you can get the petition to apply for an interview at the embassy, right?
Yes, so there's a work authorization form that your employer in the U.S. will have to work with the Department of Homeland Security to put together, and I unfortunately can't give any insider guidance into that because it's just not my government agency. But that is a process that the employer will need to go through, and then once they go through that, they'll send you the approved petition if it's approved, and then you bring it into me, and then you'll pay $190 for the visa fee, and that's the expense on the State Department side.
Yeah, because we've done it a few times, and the cost will vary between I think $3,500 up to $7,000 in the end with those costs. Often you need to get the contracts more than 6 months ahead to not have an express cost on top as well. Isn't that more likely what the cost is?
And I just can't provide any insight into that because it's just a completely different agency that handles that.
I have a question. If I go to the US on an ESTA, can I apply for a P visa afterwards while I'm there, or do I have to go to Sweden and apply and go back?
So you don't apply in the U.S. if you go on ESTA. You can apply from any country except the U.S. Because you have to go to an embassy to do it. So because we do the visas at the embassies, so you could go to another country and do it. It's best to apply from your home country though, just because a lot of your documents may be in Swedish or things like that, and it's easier for us at the embassy to understand it than it would be for someone at an embassy somewhere else in the world. So.
Okay, thank you.
What's the difference getting a work permit like as an individual who is like freelancing contrary to getting it as an employed person by a company? If I just want to go as a songwriter myself to the US, how is that differ from if I get signed by a company in the US?
Well, I believe you would need a company in the U.S. To handle the paperwork for your work permit. And I'm not able to provide a lot of insight into that because I just don't do the work permits at all. I do the visa, which is the permission to travel to the U.S., so I can't be more help there.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Also, as a songwriter, I didn't really get, was it the P visa or the O visa that was most fitting for us? And also, if we just go there on pure freelancing, trying to network, trying to just write and catch inspiration in a different scenery or whatever, do we have to need a P visa for that, or could we just go on ESTA then? Because we don't know if it's going to be material produced that's going to be released later,
Okay, so on the ESTA, if you're not performing and you're not being paid for a performance and people aren't paying to hear you do something, that's generally the ESTA. It's limited to the 90 days. I'd have to know more about your specific situation to know sort of. Gotcha. And I can talk with you afterwards. So that would be for. And what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
I guess it's just if it's not so concrete yet. You're just going there to see. You're going there with your songwriting team, but it's not like a specific project. We're just going to see what happens.
Okay, so without knowing exactly what you guys are doing when you're there, I will say that we're human beings. We know that people's plans change, that things change. So sometimes you may go somewhere and you may be on a trip to Disney World and maybe it turns into you're finding out about a music gig. Then put the correct paperwork together, come back and see us at the embassy and work on getting your visa approved. We know that people's plans change, so when things do sort of hit a point where you think, I probably need a visa for this, then come back and work through the visa process. We know that sometimes that there's a change in your plans. And I think you asked the difference between the P's and the O's. So P's for all entertainers, and then O's are, it's kind of a funny visa. It's what we call aliens of extraordinary ability. So if you, yes. And so if you come in and you are an alien of extraordinary ability, it means that you are very recognized in your field. So it could be an athlete, it could be a songwriter, it could be, the best makeup artist in the world, it could also be a neuroscientist. And so it's any of those things, but entertainers can be lumped up into that O category, and I'm sure you guys could probably think of who some obvious O applicants would be. And then the P's are just our entertainers. So.
Thanks.
Hi. What if you are actually an American, you are from America, but you live in Sweden? Would you have to like reapply for a visa or anything to perform in the US?
You are, okay, so if you are an American citizen, no visa. If you are an American citizen, it is actually illegal to get a visa because you already have permission to live and work in the US because you're a US citizen. So if you're a US citizen, you have to travel to the US on your US passport. You cannot travel to the US on another passport because you're entering the US as a US citizen, regardless of how many citizenships you have with other countries.
So you would be able to perform then, even if you're living in Sweden as a Swedish citizen?
Yeah, if you are a U.S. citizen and you have a U.S. passport, then you are able to work in the U.S. There's a lot more paperwork that goes with that. For example, if you haven't done all your registration and stuff, you would need a social security number, which is like a person number and things like that to work in the U.S. and that kind of thing. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. But yes, you should be able to travel to the U.S. and work in the U.S. because you are a U.S. citizen. Can I ask just show of hands, how many of you guys are interested in performing in the US? Okay, well, I was hoping to see more hands. But that's really exciting. I'm glad that people are interested in doing this. Maybe next year everyone will raise their hand.
Hi, I got sort of a, a combination of a follow-up question on the songwriting questions you've been getting. Because if we take the scenario that you get a P1 visa and you travel to the States, you stay there for a short amount of time and you write a couple of songs and you got an employer. But then the artist that you're writing for is moving on to a production company that wants to do a tour. Are you still eligible to be on that tour as a musician if you have a P1 visa but your employer changes?
Okay, so you have an employer in the US? Or employer in Sweden?
Employer in the US.
Okay, so if you have an employer in the US, you won't be on a B1, B2. You'll be on a P or an O.
Yeah, P1.
And so if you, let's say you're in the US and you're on a P visa, you are actually eligible to have multiple employers who sponsor you for your P visa. It adds another step to the process, but that is a possibility. Sometimes we have people that are going and they're playing for multiple people, so we'll add that all to their visa. So that definitely is a possibility.
But is it up to the employer to seek permission from the homeland? Like fill out all the forms, even if it sort of pops up. Like you said, plans can change. So let's say, hypothetically, I write a song for an artist, they want to perform it. I also play with a band, but that was not the original idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I get the opportunity. Does that employer also have to fill out all the forms?
If you don't know at the time, when you're putting all this together, I'm not sure how complicated the process is because I don't handle the work authorization. But I will say, in general, that's a great thing if you're doing good work and more people want to hire you and continue to do good work. So I can direct you to some of the information on the work authorization side, but I don't have an answer to how simple that would be from the employer perspective.
Hi. I'm Sarah. I just wanted to, it's a bit related to earlier questions. We have an artist who is planning to go to the States on a Swedish project of recording where they are in charge of the production themselves. And they're just going to go and record with friends who have a studio and not release anything in America. They're just going there to record and then come back to Sweden to release. They are wondering, and we are wondering a lot, what type of visa to apply for in that instance.
So if you look in all of the information that I was taught in my training and that we all use, it's all available online. And under the B1, B2 section of what you are allowed to do, it's online. It's called the Foreign Affairs Manual, and I can direct you to the website later if you want. But it says what you're allowed to do on a B1, B2 visa. And for the recording, if it's not going to be, you can record in the U.S. if it's not going to be released or distributed in the U.S., and that's not a problem. So that is, you can do under a B1, B2 visa as long as that's all that you're doing.
Okay, great. I was reading online and I couldn't quite make it out.
No, absolutely. And if you want, I can point you to that section later so you can make sure you're really comfortable with that. And that, you know, whoever the artist you're sending understands what the limitations are of that. So,
super. Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a bit of a follow-up to that because if you're recording in the U.S. and it
that's released in Sweden but also globally with Spotify and YouTube, wouldn't that then need a P visa instead because it's being released globally?
So I'd have to know a little bit more about your specific situation, but if it's not, if it's when you're eligible for B1, B2 is when it's going to be recorded in the U.S. and it's going to be released and distributed outside of the U.S. So if it's going to be released in some capacity in the U.S., then I think that makes it a little bit more complicated. So there may be specific parameters around that, and I imagine the situation is a little bit more complicated, but that is what is allowed on a B1, B2 visa.
Okay, and then that was just follow up to that. But if I were to bring a band to say South by Southwest, and all the performances were free, and then with a free audience, that would then go under B1 and B2, right? Because no one would be getting paid, and the audience is all there for free.
I believe so. I need to. I can actually get your contact information and talk with you about that afterwards. I know that with some of the festivals, it can be a little bit confusing, so I can give you an update on that afterwards. I need to check with my colleagues, and I'll get back to you, I promise.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you.